So joining us with the conversation today is Lisa Travella-Murawsky. And Lisa runs an organization with a colleague called Global Nomads World. Lisa, great to see you. Tell us what Global Nomads World is all about.
Sure. Happy to be here too, Matthew. So Global Nomads World, which we've abbreviated to GNW,
Right.
was founded back in 2016 with myself and Daniela Tomer. It's quite an interesting story because we both come from very different professional backgrounds. Daniela is a clinical psychologist.
Right.
And I specialize in international sport management and education. We both kind of had a chance to work together living in Brussels many years ago. And we served on different boards together, and we got to know each other and really appreciated kind of the skills we both had, where we came from, our diverse backgrounds, our diverse languages, different countries. And there was a link there. We worked well together. We kind of fed off each other's ideas, and we're really learning from each other. So we thought, why don't we start an organization together?
Great. And so what does the organization do?
So it's called Global Nomads World because I think the both of us are global nomads. We are both living outside of our country of birth. We've lived in at least 3 different countries each.
Wow.
And we've learned so much from the diversity of people that we've met in our different experiences. So we thought this is kind of what bonded us together. What brought us together is we had this commonality between our nomadic worlds. And so this is what we thought linked the two of us together. So this is how we came up with this name. Now we both kind of offer very different services. Hers are very much more in the field of psychology and coaching, and it services a lot of global nomads as well, people who move around and who it's beneficial for them to have a psychologist who they can always depend on no matter where they're living in the world. And for me, it was much more of an international sport and education side to it. So I offer my services to sport, doesn't have to be sport organizations, but organizations interested in sports.
Great. And I know that, you know, in previous conversations we've had, that for you, that, you know, there's something about the uniqueness of female leadership, and you do a lot of work, particularly with young women in India. So, you know, what is it about what is it that's unique from your perspective about female leadership, or leadership in, you know, for women?
Yeah, it's such a great question, Matthew. And I would hesitate to suggest, obviously, that all women leaders are the same, correct? I think that everybody has their own unique style of leadership, and that's developed from, let's say, experiences. However, I think it's important to understand that there are general differences between women and men in their leadership styles. And part of it could be things that have not to do with work, but even your life, trying to balancing, you know, your work, your family, and your work life, for instance, is something that I think women seem to take on more, you know, in the professional life. But something that I feel that is more often you see in women is the idea that, and part of it could be like a confidence thing. So many men, if I can very much generalize, can be very confident in their ideas and their decisions and go forth with it. I think, at least my style, what I see oftentimes as women, is you need the different views. You need to hear, you need to listen, you need to hear different perspectives before you have the confidence enough to go forward with your idea. So at least for me, that's kind of a leadership style that I use that perhaps is unique or more common with women leaders.
That's really interesting, because I was in the car yesterday and I was listening to Jenny Murray on Women's Hour on the BBC, which is a very popular program that's on the Radio 4 in the mornings. And she was talking to two of her guests Claire Wellham, I think, and Rosie Campbell from the LSE. And they were making this point about how interesting it's been that some of the world leaders that are women in reacting and dealing with the pandemic have reacted in a very different way to male leaders. And in some cases, and they weren't making the point that somehow women were that much better than men, but interestingly, the way they've approached it, at the moment, it looks as though they've been rather more successful. And one of the things they brought up was the point you made about listening to different views, being quite decisive. So I would imagine, yeah, you know, there are lots of things just in day-to-day life that women, particularly dealing with young people, you know, trying to make decisions between things that are going to have to be quite quick at making decisions on. And the fact that they just collaborated. You know, there was an element of collaboration, whereas the men were all a bit macho, and that was the point they were making. But it's interesting you see this. And how does that play out then with the work that you do in India and with the young people that you work with?
So I guess I can point to basically the beginning of this project and how I feel that this is unique in the sports world, and I really think it's the way forward for this field of sports. So I work in a field that's called sports for development. It's a newer sports field. It's perhaps maybe 10 years maximum that this idea of sport for development has begun. And basically it's using sport as a vehicle for development.
Right.
So your aim could be many different things, some sort of development aim, and you're using sports to get there. So for us, very much it's the idea of equity and women's empowerment. That's kind of what drives the program that we're building in India, and also so I partner with this foundation. It's an NGO called Naandi Foundation in India. They are a development focused foundation. They have different verticals. One of them is farming, another one is upper education, and then they have one that focuses on girls. So I found out through a colleague about this NGO, and I went on their website and I was reading kind of the amazing work that they're doing with girls, young girls, and the focus is on education.
Right.
And for me, again, it was this kind of moment where, you know, you always have to bridge different fields. I'm a big proponent of bridging different fields. And so I contacted them. They had nothing to do with sport. They had 0 sports programs. And I contacted the CEO and I just said, I really love your educational program. It's amazing what you're doing for young girls. Have you ever thought of adding a sports component to your program?
Interesting. Yeah.
And I was thrilled that he answered very positively and said, yeah, let's try this. Let's try and build something. And so this is how this project began. So can you imagine that the majority of work I do are not with sport-specific people? Actually, the majority of people I work with know very little about sports, but they're development experts. So it's this wonderful combination of the two fields that are helping to build this program.
But for me, what you've just described is that you mentioned a lot of these people actually aren't involved in sports, but they have the breadth of vision or understanding. They have the leadership, if you like, to say, hey, this is something where, yeah, partnering with someone like you and your organization could bring benefits to us that we haven't even considered. I mean, I went on the Naandi website, and you know, particularly because of my background originally, way back was in farming, and I just saw they were heavily involved in farming projects.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, how does sport, and young women in sport, fit with what they're doing? But obviously, you know, it does. It's a great connection. And I think they also talked on their site about the fact that, you know, young women mortality at childbirth was quite high. And that young women generally tend to be poorly educated in that part of India that they were focusing on. And so the sport element, what's happened? How's that developed, and who's involved, and what sort of numbers, and what sort of feedback are you getting as to how it's working?
Yeah, it's quite exciting, I think, what we're building there. So the organization itself, as you know, when you talk about India and you talk about numbers, it always blows our mind, kind of, you know, the amount of people involved. So the girls program that I work with includes 200,000 girls aged 6 through 15 years old.
Gosh. Where do you start?
So that's a good question, and this is where I think the strength of Naandi Foundation, and perhaps with my experience, is helping to make this a sustainable program. So we're very strategic in the way we're not just throwing out a bunch of balls and hoping that the girls, you know, are going to learn something in sports. So we have, you know, our 3-year plan with our sport development, and it's very, there's so many challenges, as you can imagine here. There's so many cultural challenges that we are trying to, you know, to overcome when we're introducing these programs. Girls in general in India, they don't play sports.
No. Yeah.
You go to many, you go to any open spaces, you see many boys playing cricket, you know, and running around, and you see no girls playing. So we have to start this program. We've run it for a year and a half, and slowly. And we want to make sure that we're building the right encouraging community around it. We didn't want to kind of come in really strong and saying, we are going to make these wonderful female athletes. You have to come away from your house where you're supposed to do all the cleaning and all the cooking and so many different responsibilities that these girls have, which are their priority. We want to take them away for an hour and do sports with them. That's a hard thing for people to accept, you know, in India. So the way we have to build the program is slowly and try and make sure that the people involved, you know, we want to gauge their interest and make sure we're not creating tensions in the community.
Yeah. Now, a little bird tells me that as a result of all of this, that you won a pretty prestigious award just recently. So it's just because, you know, it's great. You've got this project going with Naandi in India, and it's been recognized. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, this was quite exceptional, and it was an award. There's a Peace in Sports Foundation. It's based in Monaco, and every year it has a number of exclusive awards for projects that focus on sport for development, or what they would say more as peace in sport. And again, I was very new to this field. I've worked in sports my whole life, but for sports for development, it was only a year and a half ago that I started really getting into this field. And it was just, you know, online, I saw there was this award. But I am so incredibly motivated with the work I'm doing right now. I don't think there's a time in my career that I've been as motivated as I am now working with this group in India. And I very much believe so strongly in it. Yeah. And I saw that one of the awards was Program of the Year. And it took me about 30 seconds to decide, I think we should apply for this.
Great.
Which I contacted my colleague in Naandi. I said, I think we should apply. And she was a bit more like, whoa, Lise, I don't know. We're just starting, you know, this project. Don't you think we should wait a year and a half, see how it goes? And I said, we have already offered 37,000 girls from very kind of poor households the possibility of playing sports for the first time in their life.
Yeah.
This is an accomplishment, I feel, a very strong accomplishment. So
certainly, yeah.
Through my encouragement, we put the...
Sorry, the mic's gone. Can you hear me?
Is it okay?
Yeah, that's back now. Yeah.
Okay, good. Sorry.
No, don't worry about that. These things happen.
Yeah. So we found out months later we were kind of 3 finalists for this award, and the ceremony was in Monaco. So we were very excited to be the finalists, and somebody from the organization is supposed to go to the ceremony no matter what. And so my colleague in India said, okay, Lisa, you go. We're a finalist. You know, you're so close. You just go to the ceremony. And I said, no, I said, you have to come to this. I said, we're going to win this award and you have to be there. But the reason very much, Matthew, I wanted her to come is that it's very important to understand that this project is owned by them. It's owned by her. It's owned by all of the community activists in the field level, the thousands that work with the girls. It's owned by the girls in India. It's an Indian project. Yeah. So for me, it was very important that we show that this is not a project for me going into India and organizing everything. This is, they're owning it, and we have to show that. Yeah. So my colleague got on a plane, flew to Monaco for basically 48 hours, and we were so thrilled that it was a big ceremony. You know, the winner is, there were Olympians there, there were diplomats there, there were heads of state were there. It was far, far, far bigger than I ever anticipated. And it was a big, big ceremony in the Opera House in Monaco. And with our, you know, we heard our name being called, the winner is, and we went up and she gave, you know, a speech of thanks. So it was it was a moment in my mind, Matthew, that the world was shouting that they wanted more of our project, that this is good, this is needed, and we want to support you. So it was a really exciting moment for us.
That's fantastic. Now, Lisa, we've only got a couple more minutes really in this conversation, and it's great to, I could talk for hours really and listen to you really talking about it all. But in terms of just, if you're thinking of one of those 37,000, can you hear me?
I think you're back, Matthew. Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
That's okay. Thinking about just one of those 37,000 young women who've been introduced to sport, if you were introducing or talking to them about some of the challenges they might face as they get older, even if they remain in their own local community, but challenges in terms of leadership, what, from your experience, what might you say would be a couple of things that you try and encourage them to think about or to take on board?
So for these girls, Matthew, as you can imagine, their whole life really revolves around servicing others. Yeah. Right? It's their raison d'être, is that they're born into a family, they're helping with their family, eventually they're getting married, they help with their new family. So much of their life is about others, which is wonderful in some respect, but on the other side, it's like, I want them to feel the worth of them, that they could do stuff if they choose to. So having a sports, for instance, a sports tournament, they traveled to come to one of our tournaments. So they have their own train ticket. They have their own hotel room, of course, with friends, but they have their own bed. They have their own race. They get the bib with their number on it. It's the beginning of you're important as well. Like, you can do things for you. And I think if you're talking about developing leaders, if your whole life is spent servicing others, how are you going to grow with your own needs or your own characteristics or your own strength? Yeah. So I think to some extent, sport, I'm hoping, offers them that. You could grow through sports as an individual and as a leader as well.
Fantastic. Well, Lisa, thank you for joining me in the conversation this morning on Let's Talk Leadership. It's wonderful listening to you, and we must continue this, okay? But it's great meeting you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, Matthew. Nice to meet you also.